Cormani McClain was thought to be the next great one at Colorado. Instead, he's left the program. What went wrong? I'm going to talk about that on today's episode of Locked On Buffs.
You are Locked On Buffs, your daily podcast on the Colorado Buffaloes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? This is Locked On Buffs. I am your host, Kevin Borber. Joining me today, Rivals recruiting analyst John Garcia Jr. John, how you doing? Former co-host of Locked On Buffs, by the way, if you guys didn't know. John is based out of South Florida, and he's here to help us out, talk through all of the madness. John, appreciate you for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Yeah, talk through it is a good way to phrase it. Obviously, with Cormani McClain, there's always been a mystery around him. Go back to high school. Thought to be a Florida Gator lock. Most of the Florida media goes to his commitment ceremony, and he throws up the U and commits to Miami. I think one Miami site might have been there. Huge shocker. Like they got up and left basically because they weren't going to cover it since he went to Miami. So there's always been a mystery element that he has projected, and I think this probably leads to a lack of surprise in his decision to hit the portal, even though however many weeks ago he was on social media denying all of the portal rumors that you and I have heard constantly really for several weeks.
Right. I did an episode. I looked it up yesterday because everyone got upset. I was like, this is what I'm hearing. He's probably going to go to the portal. It's March 14th. And people were like, you're wrong. He denied it in a video. And it's like, well, the portal doesn't open for a month. So, of course, he's not going to be like, yeah, I'm transferring. But one thing that I wanted to go back to, and this is let's just talk about the overall kind of story of how we got here. You already mentioned it. His recruitment was weird. He was a Florida lock. All of a sudden went to Miami. All of a sudden, Deion Sanders and Charles Kelly get in the mix, and he's going to Boulder. And what was a pretty much ghosting of Miami. He just didn't show up to sign his national letter of intent, which, I mean, I think it's a weird and sort of pressured situation that these guys are under when all these coaches are coming forward like, hey, you got to come here, especially since Coach Prime was so late onto the scene at the time. And then fast forward to the start of the season. He obviously wasn't there for Colorado spring ball, gets to fall camp, and he's not in football shape, which, I mean, combine that and there's the altitude. It's difficult to show up ready to be the guy. And then we're a few weeks into the season, and I believe you came on the show around this time because Coach Prime was like, yeah, he doesn't show up to meetings. He's late to things. He's not watching film. And we kind of talked about the difficulties of being a college athlete because obviously it's an adjustment period. In high school, these guys show up. They're the gods. They're the kings of whatever school they're from. And then he kind of played and was getting torched a little bit. So talk to me about what you've been hearing about this entire process. Do you think it was a mistake for him to come to Colorado and all that?
No, I won't go that far. Obviously, that's a decision that really only Cormani and his camp would be able to reveal. Two things. One, it's so fluid. The portal is so wide open now that not any one decision can be viewed truly negatively, whether it's, hey, this was a stepping stone to where I wanted to be, or you take the positive approach and say, hey, this was a learning experience. This was what was necessary to get me to eventually where I need to be, whether that's somewhere physically or mentally. And I think in this case, we'll probably see both of those come true for Cormani. So I don't know if we can say it was the wrong decision to go to Colorado. I mean, the guy got true freshman snaps at the Power 5 level at the most talked about program in the country. So on that level, I think you could say it was the right decision. Obviously, it didn't work out the way most of us anticipated just from a football standpoint. But that's the thing, in our business and evaluation business, we can measure as much tangible information and data and stats and all of that as we can. We can't measure the intangible. We cannot measure who the person is, how they deal with adversity and change and transition. And like you said, I mean, the high school to college transition is a huge deal. I don't care if you're playing D3 or NAIA ball. Like it's a huge deal to make that transition. Everyone's good. Everyone's working hard. Everyone is going to approach it professionally, especially if they've been there. So imagine, again, at the most talked about, spotlighted program in the country. So I do think there's a multiple ways to look at this thing. So I don't think it was the wrong decision for Cormani. It was certainly a positive splash and spin for Coach Prime when it all went down. But obviously, nobody wants to see their player, leave their program, especially one so coveted from such a pipeline state like Florida has become for the Buffs.
Yeah, I think it was a tough fit for Cormani. I think this happens all the time I don't know where he's going to end up, and I'll ask you in a little bit where you think he possibly could. But maybe it was too far from home. Maybe it was hard not to have his family with him at all times. Maybe it was hard not to have his support system there and with him. But I will say it was sort of a unfortunate situation. You have Deion Sanders, who's the best corner of all time. You have Travis Hunter, who is arguably the best player in college football as a two-way star. Like that is the mold to follow, and clearly it just didn't work out. John, is there anything that has stood out to you, and are there any schools that are standing out to you now that he's in the portal?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of chatter down here in Florida that he's coming back home. Does that mean literally? If that is the case, I think USF, which has started to recruit at a bit of a higher clip under Alex Golish, had a great season last year, would make a ton of sense. That's the literal home school for Cormani there in the Tampa area. Or does it just mean SEC, ACC country? Does Florida, which was the favorite, try to get back involved? Corey Raymond led that charge. He's now at LSU. Can the Tigers get involved? What about Miami, where he was once verbally committed? There's an expectation that the Hurricanes will go after cornerback recruits. So why not one who was on the commitment list? Or did that ghosting turn off Mario Cristobal in a way where it's like, hey, let's just move on altogether? So I think there's going to be no shortage of interest with Cormani. I do think colleges are going to need to do their homework and bring him in for a visit first and really sit down with him to see where he is at mentally with this thing. How discouraging for him was it to not only wait and underwhelm relative to expectations, but even when he got on the field, like you said, not finding the success that he had at his two high schools previously. How much did that affect Cormani, which is kind of the question that isn't being asked as much. So I do think these schools need to do their homework, which typically leads to a longer process. I do think he needs to take visits and really explore, these different options, not only geographically, but personnel wise, human to human. Hey, who can guide me better than I thought I needed, a year ago. So I'm curious about it. I think there's going to be no shortage of interest, but I do think it won't be a snap situation like we saw, when Prime took the job at Colorado and all these transfers started to pop without even visiting. It won't be something as fast or fluid like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's a big point that I wanted to circle back to was Coach Prime gets hired, and it's like, okay, there's a lot of excitement. He put together a top 25 class, and I think he was on the job for about 15 minutes. And none of those guys had obviously visited Colorado before, or probably had never even set foot in the state. And all of a sudden, guys like Cormani McClain, Dylan Edwards, who was a Notre Dame pledge at that time, flipped. And it was like, that's really exciting for Coach Prime. But now we're kind of seeing the repercussions of like, okay, maybe I rushed that decision a little bit. And I think for Cormani, everything he does was always magnified because he was always such an enigma, if I guess you could say. Like his recruitment was locked down with Florida, and then it wasn't. And then it was locked down with Miami, and then it absolutely was not. And then he comes to Colorado, but it took him a while to get there. And then he wasn't playing. And he was just never – I feel like there was never any sort of stability, if you will. So I think it's just finding the right situation for him. It's unfortunate it didn't work out in Boulder, but obviously Colorado is going to have to move on from him, and Cormani is going to move on from Colorado. Like you said, John, South Florida, Miami, LSU, schools to look out for him. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about the Cormani saga that fans should know?
Look, this happens every cycle, right? I mean, just look at the portal. It's only been open for a day and a half, and how many 4- and 5-star names are like reminders for us in the recruiting industry? Oh, like Jacoby Matthews. I remember covering him. There's a lot of Cormani McClain type situations. I just think, as you said, everything he did was so marked and so magnified that this presents as a huge, I guess, bust. We don't really call them busts, until they're done playing. Right. But for Colorado, it's certainly a bust relative to expectations. So I think, hey, you just got to, scrap it. Dust is settled. It is what it is, and move forward. Certainly, Prime and company are going to crush the portal, I'm assuming, as usual. And it looks like they're going to turn up some heat, at the high school recruiting level. I think they get a couple of commitments before this month is over. So I think things will obviously look on the up and up for Colorado, and most likely for Cormani as well.
And a PSA before I let John go. You adults out there on Twitter need to stop getting into Twitter spaces and bullying 20-year-olds. It's really weird. They had that with Cormani McClain yesterday. Really weird, really cringeworthy. Don't do it. John, I appreciate you for hopping on. When I come back, I'm going to be talking about where Colorado goes next because they're going to need to add some talent. But first, a word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked on Buffs is brought to you by our sponsors over at Monopoly Go. I've been told I'm a competitive person. John knows I'm a competitive person. I like to win. It is what it is. We all have a competitive side, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I could charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but I can also heist their vaults of their riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is, but it's not just competitive. It's just not my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends. You can join and have fun with all your friends. You don't have to always steal from them. People all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Welcome back to Locked on Buffs. Joining me now is Scott Procter, our good friend over at the Colorado. Scott, appreciate you for joining us. We were talking about Cormani McClain. I obviously dove into his whole saga with John Garcia Jr. Talk about where you think it went wrong and what Colorado needs to do after the fact, or what caused this move. Yeah, just dive in for us.
For sure, man. I mean, I think this is something that this is a long time coming, man. This is a long time coming. This has kind of been building up since pretty much Cormani arrived on campus in Boulder, ahead of his freshman season. Originally there were rumors like, why hasn't he arrived in Boulder yet as a true freshman his first time on campus? And then obviously he gets there. He doesn't play right away. He's still kind of getting his feet underneath him. Obviously, Coach Prime, which I think was really kind of the start and probably the downfall of this entire relationship, ahead of, I believe, after the Oregon game last year, he said in the media, he was asked about Cormani. What does he need to do? What do you need to see out of Cormani to help him get on the field? And Coach Prime instantly, he sounded pretty irritated when he said it too. How about showing up to meetings? How about showing up to meetings on time? And that's the biggest red flag you can have as an athlete, not doing the bare minimum things that all your other teammates are doing, all your other teammates are expected to do. And I think if Cormani wasn't a 5-star talent, and the number one cornerback in his class, we probably might have seen him leave the program earlier, be asked to leave the program earlier. But I think, this coaching staff, Coach Prime in particular, tried to have a lot of patience with Cormani because, again, he is so talented. He's such a gifted player and a young player, too, who obviously still has a lot to learn, both mentally and physically. But, I heard from somebody within the building yesterday that, this move to Cormani to go into the transfer portal was not a surprise, that Coach Prime and his staff gave Cormani a multitude of opportunities to kind of, right the situation. And, obviously for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. And I think this was time, before the spring game starts, before, the spring portal ends, so you can still kind of add to the cornerback room if you need to. But honestly, they will, and they probably should. But, I think as of right now, losing Cormani McClain, who only made 4 starts last year, played in 9 games, didn't play a big role in that secondary. The secondary should honestly still be better. It should still be pretty good. Obviously, Travis Hunter, the best player in college football, is going to be moved all around that secondary, playing in the slot, playing on the outside. And obviously, there are 2 additions via the transfer portal. DJ McKinney is a real player. This is an experienced player, played in every game for Oklahoma State last year, who was in, the Big 12 championship game, a really good program. And he still has 3 years of eligibility left. He's looking like a real player. He was sent out to do media a couple weeks ago after practice. And Coach Mathis, the cornerbacks coach of Colorado, said they knew that they were getting a player in McKinney, but they didn't know that they were also getting a leader. And just think about how that kind of, is different from the situation with Cormani, which we don't even know if Cormani's a good teammate, let alone a good leader. But that's what they know what they have in DJ McKinney. Preston Hodge as well, the transfer from Liberty, has played a lot of football over the last 2 years, very experienced. So I think with those 3 guys at corner, and in addition to the rest of the depth that they have there, the secondary, I think they're going to be fine. It sucks having a 5-star leader program, but it was clearly a headache. It was clearly a problem for some time now, and I think this was is the right time to do it. But I'm definitely wishing Cormani the best, and I hope wherever he lands, he can get on the field and, kind of show everybody, what, his talent, really is.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this our last episode that we did where we had our $20 transfer budget. I think now they got a dollar or two to another corner just because you never know if someone gets injured, especially Travis, not to say he's injury prone, but both seasons he's played at Jackson State, he got injured. Colorado, he missed some time last year. Plus, you're playing both ways. You're playing a lot of snaps. Things could happen. Either way, you want depth at that position. It could be DJ McKinney as well or Hodges. You just want someone behind them. And then there's a lot of corners out there in the mix right now that you could go get that will be able to kind of fill that role. You have a guy like Travis J, who I think they played at corner a little bit last year. I don't know if it always went well, but they played him there. They have Omarion Cooper, who I know he's been moved to safety, but he could start at corner. So they have depth.
For sure.
But to circle back to the Cormani point that you made, I would say, and I think there's an interesting video that I tweeted yesterday over on my Athlon page where Coach Prime says, you know what today is? Portal day. If anyone want to jump, jump. And I was like, now in hindsight, maybe that was like at someone.
Cormani was feeling froggy. Clearly, Cormani was feeling froggy.
He was feeling froggy, or maybe he already had jumped. But either way,
right.
I think it's one of those things where for Cormani McClain, for Colorado, people are going to consider him a bust. And I feel like that's a fair sort of assumption or a fair assessment for Colorado. But he could still pan out elsewhere. It was just an unfortunate situation that didn't work out. But the signs were there, and you brought up a few of them. He didn't show up right away. And I talked about this with John earlier on the show. Didn't show up right away. When he did show up, he wasn't in football shape.
Yeah.
Then it took him a while to get on the field. He got on the field, and it was not. He didn't have an immediate impact. We'll just put it that way.
We saw some flashes, but he was just never able to put it together. Not that you would expect a true freshman to be able to put it together right away, but again, when you're as highly talented as he is, when you're being coached by, Coach Prime, one of the best cornerbacks ever do it, when you're able to learn from Travis Hunter, one of the best corners players in college football to ever do it, it kind of makes you think if you couldn't figure it out here, where can you figure it out? But again, luckily, he's still a very young kid. He's still a freshman in school. Again, people need to think about that. 18 or so years old, maybe 19. This kid still has a lot of learning to do, and that's what he is. He's still a young man, and I don't think a lot of people. I'm sure you saw some stuff with Spaces last night on Twitter Spaces, and stuff can get ugly on social media. And I would just like everybody to remind themselves that these are young kids that we're talking about, and maybe you don't like a personal decision that they make or how they're handling things with their life, but it is their life at the end of the day, and we're all outsiders, to somebody else's life. And I feel like that's just kind of where
it's a great point. I ended my first segment with telling people not to do that because it's very cringeworthy and it's really weird.
And it looks bad. It makes all those CU fans out there look bad, quite honestly. And again, recruits pay attention to this kind of stuff. They see how other recruits and players of a certain program are being treated and talked about on social media, and that might, prevent them from taking a visit to your school or committing to your school or even considering your school. And that's something that I think a lot of fans need to think about and, be more proactive on.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird scenario. Just to wrap it up in Cormani, it didn't work out, which is fine. But obviously, and I did an episode about this. I think it was when they landed McKinney and even Hodge, who you mentioned as well, and they've both been thriving, as we see in the well-off media videos.
Yeah.
Those guys were brought in to add depth, but those guys were brought in to push Cormani to the next level and kind of see, hey, do you want this or do you not? And clearly he did not want it at Colorado, which is fine. But Colorado, I think, had a contingency plan in place. They were not going to be betting on Cormani McClain. They have guys in place who are willing and ready to play. And so I thought that was really interesting.
And experienced too.
Yeah. Very experienced, very proven as well, which is hard to come by these days. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Colorado's transfer portal tactics. They're getting slandered. Is the slander necessary, though? This episode of Locked On Buffs would not be possible without our sponsors over at Yahoo Finance. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising cost of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of your financial freedom, right? Well, with Yahoo Finance, you could get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to reach that financial freedom. For me, for more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand that everyone gets behind. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finances gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Welcome back to Locked on Buffs. Appreciate you guys for joining us on this fine Wednesday. Joining me still, Scott Procter. Scott, my guy. Which it's hard to miss on social media, but Colorado's active. They got the Twitter fingers going. They are active for sure. Coach Prime had a tweet about the portal opening. Shedeur had a tweet about the portal opening. But one Mr. Shilo Sanders went a different route. He went sort of a Instagram ad, if you will. He posted on his Instagram story, if you're a defensive transfer, DM me. If you're an offensive transfer, DM Shedeur. And is it weird or not weird? I think weird's a bad word. Is it interesting to see a player sort of market themselves like this? Kind of. We don't really see it that often. Like, hey, DM me, or like this is like they're selling something on Facebook Marketplace. But
for sure,
a lot of people are coming at them. Is Colorado's tactic methods weird, wacky, necessary? Why are people hating? Let's just go there.
People hating because it's the Sanders. Let's be for real, and it's a Colorado football program. I mean, that's really. I almost tweeted yesterday, like, one thing that the Sanders gonna do is stay in people's mouths and stay on social media. You know what I'm saying? And that's really kind of what it is. And I go back to, I mean, I'll just say this: it's definitely a unique tactic because we don't see it often, but that doesn't make it wrong or weird or really anything of, on those lines. I mean, I think back to the previous portal in December and January, where Shedeur literally went on Twitter and added LeJontay Wester, who was in the portal from FAU, and said, we want LeJontay Wester in Boulder. 2 days later, LeJontay Wester was committed to the University of Colorado. And that's just how college football has evolved nowadays, with the transfer portal in particular, with social media in particular. When a young man from another program enters the portal, you know what I mean? It's pretty much free reign. And who's a better recruiter than Shedeur Sanders? Who can be a better recruiter than, Shilo Sanders, who, again, it has the ear of Deion Sanders. And again, you might look at it like, kids shouldn't be out here recruiting, but I'm here to tell you that it happens all the time. It just doesn't typically always happen on the timeline or on the IG story. But I can guarantee you that players all around the country at all different schools are DMing, messaging schools or kids at other schools once they enter the portal. Like, hey, I know you want to come play with me. I know you see what we did last year. I know you want to come join this. This happens all the time. But again, because it's Shilo Sanders and it's because it's Shedeur and, Deion is involved, people are going to feel some type of way about it. And usually that type of way is, one way and, not necessarily the most, thought out way. But again, this is certainly a unique tactic. But again, we've seen it work. We've seen this, the Buffs did very well. A top 5 portal class, this past year in December, January portal. And again, we'll see what they do during this spring portal. They haven't added anybody yet. Obviously, a handful of guys have left. Nobody really who was projected to be a starter other than Cormani McClain, but they're going to add some guys via the portal, and I bet it's going to be a result of some recruiting done by Shedeur, Shilo, and obviously Coach Prime and the rest of that staff.
Yeah, exactly. And Scott, I don't know how often you're sliding into DMs, but hypothetical here, if you were hosting a DM session, so it's like, okay, like say you're Shilo or Shedeur, who do you want? What position groups and what kind of guys do you want sliding into the DM for this spring window? Because obviously, I would say there are about 11 departures, I think is the number right now.
Yeah, it's 10 or 11. Yeah.
So you have 10 spots, we'll say. What positions do you want these guys from? Is there certain guys that you want coming into the DMs? Let me know, Scott.
Yeah, if I'm Shedeur, I'll start there. I want a couple of linemen for sure. I want a couple of tackles. I'm definitely sliding in the DMs of Andrew Chambly. I believe that's how you say his last name. The transfer offensive tackle from Arkansas, who was all SEC freshman team this past season. He's actually visiting Colorado for their spring game later this month. That could be an opportunity to, lock him in. That would be a huge get for the Buffs. So again, if I'm Shedeur, I'm trying to lock in a couple tackles. I'm trying to lock in a running back or two. And I'll pretty much be set. Maybe you add a wide receiver or two just for the thrill. But other than that, it's a couple tackles, maybe a running back or two. And if you Shilo, you looking at a corner. You may be looking at, Anthony Johnson, who just entered the portal, cornerback from Western Kentucky. He was Pro Football Focus's 4th highest graded cornerback last year, earned a 90.3 coverage grade, a 5'10 guy, 44 tackles, 4 picks this past season again for Western Kentucky. So maybe sliding the DMs of one Anthony Johnson, maybe looking for a corner or two. Again, I like where they're at in terms of that starting group, but again, you need some depth. Injuries happen. It's inevitable in the game of football. So again, from Shilo, I'm looking for a corner. Definitely looking for maybe 2 linebackers, probably 2 linebackers, and a couple more guys to throw up front and big guys in the middle, defensive tackle. I actually just released a story on the Colorado one. Go check that out a couple of days ago about 10 transfer portal targets for Colorado this spring portal before that window closes on the last day of the month. Again, those 10 guys, I think I had about 5 defensive linemen, 5 defensive linemen, about 3 offensive linemen, a running back. I think that's really kind of how it was broken down, but there are definitely some targets out there to be had. And again, Shilo and Shedeur are going to be part of that effort.
Yeah, I think they got to be. It's kind of when your face of the program is willing to get out there and get in the nitty gritty. I think it helps.
Yeah.
Just because.
And this is another thing too that annoys me about people clowning Shedeur. Is he not one of the best players in college football? Like, we're not even talking about quarterbacks. We're talking about one of the best players in college football who, again, is projected to be a top, let's say a first round pick in next year's draft. Mm-hmm. I mean, usually when you have that type of celebrity in college, you should use it a little bit. Especially when you're trying to use it to help your team and help your team improve in the win-loss column after, a 4-8 season. So for anybody saying that Shedeur need to just focus on football and not be recruiting, you're being disingenuous because you're going to clown him and the Colorado Buffaloes for being 4-8 one season and then clown them for trying to improve via the transfer portal for the next season. Make that make sense. It doesn't.
It's weird. And if you don't think, like, for instance, I remember a few years ago, Caleb Williams, when Jordan Addison was in the portal, if you don't think Caleb Williams was hitting him up via text or the DM,
exactly.
Like, relax. Everyone relax. This Colorado team, they're going to add, I would say they're probably going to add, now that they've gotten rid of, now that they've had some departures, if you will, they're going to add about 10 guys, I would say. It's going to move fast because the portal closes in, I think it's 2 weeks already. So it's going to be a fast sort of portal, and then they're going to head into fall camp. But it's going to be a hectic time. Me and Scott will have you covered over on Athlon, over on the Colorado. Scott, I appreciate you for joining us. Tell people where they can find you, what you're working on, and all that jazz before we go.
Absolutely. Go follow me on Twitter or X, however you call it, at Scott Procter. There it is down below, Scott Procter _. And then go follow my work on the Colorado one as well. Coach Prime is expected to talk to the media tomorrow. That'd be Thursday. So expect plenty of good tidbits from him, obviously during the busy week and with the portal open and whatnot. So stay on the lookout. And Kevin, as always, man, keep up the good work. Appreciate you having me on as always.
Appreciate you for joining the show. I appreciate you guys for tuning in every single day, making me your first listen. Hope you guys have a great Wednesday, a great hump day, and I will see you guys tomorrow.